Good, good. Yourself?
Yeah, not too bad. I'm just finally wrapping up projects, so I'm coming up for air. It's been a long 5 months.
That's good to hear. Are you allowed to talk about what project it is?
I Yeah, I was just helping out Hans on Dune. Yeah, because I we finished Gran Turismo about like a month and a half ago, and I
Yeah.
worked on the first one, and they were just wrapping stuff up, so I just came in and didn't do much, but just a few things here and there because I was only on the project for about a month. But yeah, it was because I started on Gran Turismo in February and didn't really stop until June. So yeah.
Wonderful. Well, congratulations on your long career. Not that
Oh,
long,
thank
but
you.
still, I mean, I've gone through your credits and, um, grown up watching Hans Zimmer and people like Mark Mancina, and then
Yeah.
Harry Gregson William, Steve Jablowski, I think it is.
Yeah,
I forget his,
yeah.
yeah. I mean, more or less all of them kind of came through Hans Zimmer. I think it used to be a company called Media Ventures. I don't know if it still exists.
Um,
Um,
no, Media Venture shut down in the early 2000s
right.
because it's a partnership that has since been dissolved and now it's remote control. But yeah, they all came up from under him, Lauren included. Yeah.
Yeah, and how actually Lauren, I was introduced to his work from the 13th Hour,
Oh, right,
Michael
right.
Michael Bay film. I think I could be wrong. Correct me. I think that was one of his early, not necessarily her first film, but something that got more recognized than the other, at least to me.
Yeah,
And go on.
yeah, absolutely. Lauren was working with Hans for I don't know, 7 or 8 years, and they he had like various credits. But yeah, he started to work with Michael Bay and started to venture out, work with oh my gosh, what's his name? Uh, I'm sorry, it'll
That's
come to
okay.
but yeah, I'm just it's incredible how much Lauren has blown up because I started actually working underneath him as his assistant back in 2008 because when I came to remote control I started off as an intern and then Lauren needed a new technical assistant, so I started with him back then and kind of started on this journey with him years and years ago, and it's absolutely incredible how his career has taken off because he's just such a talented composer and musician, and his ability to write music at such a incredible speed is unheard of. I don't know anyone else that can write tunes as quickly as that man can.
Right. We'll come back to him, but I want to learn more about you. What's your journey like, getting into the world of music? Not necessarily what you're doing right now in Hollywood, but just the early days, what got you into music and the path that you've taken to get where you are.
Yeah, so I started playing guitar in bands in high school. Mostly it was mostly like hardcore punk metal music, and we drifted between I think I was in six different bands. It's that kind of high school thing where you start a band and then you start another band and then
Mm-hmm.
you keep
Yep.
transferring over. But growing up, I was actually an avid hockey player. And
Mm.
I left to play hockey up in like Washington and Spokane. And I played in like a Canadian league for a year, and I actually really injured myself. I pulled my groin and my hip flexor. I was just skating, and I was skating down the ice. Another person came up, kneed me in my. It was a knee
Eesh.
to knee collision. My knee came all the way around. I was in bed for like 3 months after that. And I believe that was the moment where I really started to play the guitar and I really started to learn about music, how to write music, learning about music theory, circle of fifths, all of those kinds of things, and started to really immerse myself in that world because ever since I was a kid, I love playing guitars and I always wanted to be in a rock band, but I wanted to write music, and I would sit there playing guitar and I'd be like, oh well, I could do this line, but then underneath that I can do this line, And I was like, okay, there's a lot of steps to writing music, and I started to see that I could do this digitally with computers, that I could learn how to write music on computers and Pro Tools, Cubase, whatever, what have you. And so after I had injured myself and I'd really immersed myself in this world, I started to look for education to where I could learn how to use computers to write music. Um, so I decided to not go to Berkeley or any one of these schools that would take a degree or take around 4 years to complete, 3 to 4 years. And I found this school called Los Angeles Recording School.
Mm.
And because a friend had went there, and they mostly specialize in engineering, and on that side of things. But I had a secret passion, or like a secret, when I went through it, I was like, well, I want to go through this program to learn how to write music on computers. And it was such a small form of that whole world, that I kind of took that opportunity. And the school offered internship programs with studios, different places around here in Los Angeles. And my guidance counselor called me in once, and he was like, "Okay, so, I know that you want to write music, you don't really want to do engineering stuff, and we have this film composer named Hans Zimmer." And I was like, "Who the hell's Hans Zimmer?"
What year
Uh,
was this?
this was 2007.
Okay, so he was very well established by then. Okay.
Yeah, well, I had no idea what film music
Yeah.
was. I
Yeah.
just, whenever I was watching a movie and I saw music by, I would always be like, no, that's not, that person didn't write this song that's playing right now. I didn't understand what background music was for film.
Right,
And,
right.
I was such like a rock EDM guy that I didn't even necessarily think about it. Because like another, I'm actually very big into electronic music, and another one of the things that I did when I was 18, 19 was I made loops for DJs, material for them to interchange between songs and stuff like that. So I had like a very big passion for electronic music. And so when my guidance counselor told me about this guy Hans Zimmer, I went back home, I Googled him, I started looking into him, and I was like, oh my gosh, I love the music for Pirates, like I love the Kraken, like I love Gladiator. Gladiator was one of my favorite movies, and I couldn't believe that there was this whole world out there, and it was a whole new discovery for me. Um, so yeah, my guidance counselor, he offered me two positions. He's like, you can have an unpaid internship at Hans Zimmer Studio, or there's a paid job at a ADR sound effects editing house here in Santa Monica. And so, I went to my parents and I said, like, hey, there's this big film composer, but the job's unpaid. I don't know. And they said it'll be about 3 months until I'll start getting paid like a runner rate and everything. And I was like, should I take this job that's actually paying? And my parents go, no, you go with this guy, Hans Zimmer. It seems like you can get such higher places.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I did that. I went home. I worked for my dad on the weekends just to make enough money to get by. And then yeah, I started off as an unpaid internship for about 2.5 months. And then I was a runner for another month. And then I started working with Lauren. And yeah, just I started off as a technical assistant, helping him with any technical issues. And then, he saw that I had an ear for sound design, since I started making sounds for him, started to add stuff to some of his pieces. And then I started writing for him. And I kind of did everything all at once. I was, because Lauren wasn't as big back then. So I was his technical assistant, his writer, personal assistant, all of these things. And then Lauren gave me an opportunity with Hans. It was on Dark Knight Rises.
Mm.
Uh, and he put in a good word to Hans. And he said, hey, this Andrew kid, he may be able to put two notes together, and he may be able to get stuff to sound good. So that was my opportunity. And yeah, the first musical task I ever did for Hans was take his Bane suite, which was in 5/4, and turn it into 4/4. And so yeah, so that kind of started my whole career with Hans. And then I was additional writer for Hans for probably 6 or 7 years. And then, yeah, left, started doing some films on my own, and then came back, worked on Top Gun, worked on Dune. And then, yeah, kind of where I'm at today. But, it really is kind of a big family here at Remote with, it is a bit more of a family. It's not just a working
Right.
environment. So, it's nice to stay in touch with people and, work on new films, collaborate on new material and everything.
What a wonderful story, and kudos to your parents for guiding you. Because normally, I wouldn't say all the time. Normally, parents wouldn't understand. Not all, but most parents don't understand art and the idea of unpaid and not even knowing who Hans Zimmer was. So, I mean, that really set a trajectory for you in working with Hans and Lorne, and then working on Dark Knight and all the other titles that you just talked about. Wonderful, love it. Absolutely love your story, man. It's truly amazing the journey that you have taken, and I mean, you told me in what 5 minutes, but the kind of stuff that you probably went through. I mean, only the difficulties and the path that you took and how you got there. So good for you.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely not without crazy work ethic and long hours.
Yeah.
Because I think that 2009, I think that year I worked on around 12 films, and we got to Christmas and I finally had a couple days off, and then I kind of went through the whole year and I was like, oh my gosh, this whole year I've only had 5 days off. Like I was working weekends, working 8-hour weeks, and it's just it takes a lot of effort and a lot of time. And yeah, it really is a huge dedication, and it's just no one's ever gifted, all of these things. You need
Yeah.
to work hard for them, and you need to work through your process of elimination to get rid of bad ideas and let good ideas actually flourish and stuff. So
Yeah. Well, it's one thing to get to where, like, to find a break, right? That
yeah,
might be, it's not easy, but that might be easier than consistently maintaining it, because that's where a lot of people, not just in arts and film and music, any career, everybody sees the final output of a successful individual, and they
yeah,
feel like they don't understand the difficulties it took them in the work ethic, because that's the most important thing among anything else. You can be a terrible engineer, you can be a terrible whatever, but if you have a strong work ethic, employer will notice that and will allocate you in the right place.
yeah, exactly. And I mean, I learned that from Lauren and Hans. I mean, Hans never stops having ideas. He's having ideas every single day up until the last second that the dub prints. And there's a lot of great ideas. There's some bad ideas, but a lot of these things actually meticulate to something that's actually quite special. And it's incredible just looking back on some of the films, like some of the big themes, like some of like the really like, some of the things that
Mm-hmm.
really resonated with the audience are they come at the end of the project. They're not the first idea. They're like
Mm.
the 200th idea that has stemmed from 40 other ideas. And I think that that's where I learned it from, is from Hans and Lauren, is to never be satisfied and to always explore what else is out there, because it's the same thing in records. But like these producers will work on a record for years and years and years perfecting it, and we don't have that luxury. We have anywhere from 3 to 6 months
Yeah.
to get all of these things finished and articulated.
Yeah, and I remember, I mean, I don't have any stats to back this up, but I'm just speaking from my own childhood. What John Williams did in the 70s and the 80s, I would say. Hans Zimmer came, I think one of his most first recognized score was Rain Man with Tom Cruise and
Yeah,
Dustin Hoffman. And then when Crimson Tide came out, that put him at another level. But I specifically remember the one that really got me. There were two soundtracks that really got me into movie scores. Last of Mohicans by Trevor. what's his name? Rabin? Is it
Raven,
Rabin? Trevor
yeah.
Rabin, yeah. And then The Rock, Harry Gregson Williams, and Hans Zimmer. And I think the idea of background scores becoming so popular started, in my view, because of those films. Because it wasn't a huge thing, as far as I know, in the 80s. I mean, there would be like a best music category and Oscar category, there would be audio cassettes. But what Hans Zimmer and his team and all of you guys have done, it's just a completely new thing where I even remember in the late 90s, early 2000s, a lot of movies that Zimmer or other great composers did would not get a soundtrack of score. It would just be like songs that were featured in the
Right,
film. But now
right.
I think it's like a mandatory thing. Now every movie gets a score released either on iTunes, Spotify, or a CD. But yeah, no, this is that's it's just such a thing to see evolution of, and Hans Zimmer. You know, now he's doing all these concerts that are sold out in Europe, and my son, he's such a crazy fan of it, and I bought him a piano and I started doing some lessons with him with the instructor, and he just plays that Interstellar
Oh
Cornfield
yeah.
back and forth. Is it Cornfield? No, it's the one with the really fast the instrument that they use in church. You know
The
um,
organ.
yeah, the organs. Yeah, but
Yeah.
yeah, he's inspired so many people. I mean, and he's such a humble guy at the same time. So
Yeah.
you're in great hands, man.
No,
Um,
he truly is an incredible person, and because I went on two Hans Zimmer tours. I went on the one in
mm,
22, the European tour, and then I went on another European tour back in 2017. So I got to see how much people love him, and this I wasn't able to go on this most recent tour because of Gran Turismo, but when he was
yeah.
playing in London. I went to the show, and I that was the first show I've ever seen on that side of the stage. And I was like, this isn't film music. This is like a rock show.
Yeah. There's a very popular video on YouTube. I mean, it was a really nice. It was shot really well. It had like 10 different cameras. It was a really nice auditorium, and this was the piece that he was playing, "Time" from Inception,
Mhm.
and then he walks out with the guitar, and people went nuts when they saw him. I don't know if you were there. I think it was 2017 one. I'm guessing,
Yeah,
but yeah, he's got such a fall, and like you said, I think the key thing is you get that kind of stuff like at a rock band, or like somebody like Britney Spears or Drake
right.
or whatever. But he's just built a huge fan base, and I think it's also his personality, of course, that attracts people to him.
Yeah.
Going back to your work when you started with Dark Knight, tell me a story from Dark Knight. Was it Dark Knight or Dark Knight Rises? You said Dark
Dark Knight Rises.
Rises, yes, Bane. Um, what did you work on? What was your first? What was your job on that? Like, what were you doing, and the kind of challenges at as a first film that you came across? What was that like?
Um, yeah, I think, this was the first film that I was working with Hans in a creative atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
I I spend a lot of time making sounds. I spend a lot of time designing synths, using new and different techniques on how to adjust things and make things work differently. I'm very much a rock guy. I'm very much into how things sound, getting things to sound good. And so yeah, the first thing that he had me bring come on, and because no one really knew how to do it, was the Bane suite, which is in 5/4s, Deshi Deshi Basara Basara Deshi Deshi Basa. And but we had a lot of action cues where Batman is in 4/4. And
Mm.
so, no one really knew how to turn that piece from 5/4 into 4/4. So I kind of sat with it for 2 days, and then all of a sudden it just came to me, just Deshi Basara Basara Deshi Basara Basara. And then that was a way to incorporate the Bane material in with all of the Batman material. Um, so that was the first task, and then everything just kind of went from there. Hans has a lot of ideas, and a lot of these ideas take a lot of effort in order to experiment. Trying to find new and different ways on how to do things. And Dark Knight Rises, we had Catwoman, so there was a lot of like
Mm,
knife sounds, things that Hans had made, and so I was trying to expand upon that, or experimenting with slowing things down. There's this plugin called Paul Stretch. I think we've used and abused it over the last 10 years or 15 years, and I think it's about time we need to move on from it. But it slows things down up to like 800, 10,000%. So it was slowing really fast pieces down, seeing what new artifacts came in there, taking brass effects from sessions, slowing that down, turning it into pads. And then I also worked with Junkie XL on adding drums to pieces, to action pieces to bring them up. And then I also wrote cues. I think I wrote around 7 or 8 cues, working closely with Hans and Chris and everyone else on, getting Hans's themes in there because, Dark Knight was, funnily enough, when they were finishing Dark Knight with Heath Ledger, that's when I started interning here. And
mm,
it was the score that really just pulled me into film music because I was like, it's sound design based. He's only using 2 notes for the Joker. Like there are new things that I've never heard before. And I was just like, yeah, this is fucking cool. And I it was just it was more up my Strauss. More up my street. These kind of more production type style effects, bringing EDM dance music into film music, but doing it in a new and different ways that doesn't feel so regimented.
mm-hmm.
Uh, and yeah, it really is. It really was a project that just kind of pulled us all in together. And then, I remember I was out in London, working with Hans on this, like the small, romantic comedy, and he had just gone to the premiere for Dark Knight Rises in London. And then the day after, they had the shooting at Aurora.
Mm.
Um, and kind of the whole world just came crashing down. And that's when Hans decided to write a piece for all of the fallen victims and the people that lost their lives and all the people that were affected. And he wrote this, gorgeous piece, choral piece, that, we put together in like 3 days and then recorded choir at Air and then released it. And, all of the proceeds went to it. So it was a very heavy first project that kind of encompassed a rather large period of time. And yeah.
Well, it's probably sets you. It's always nice in retrospect that you do something really, really challenging and tough because then it sort of sets the tone in your mind how life is gonna be. As opposed to you just being thrown into something easy and then all of a sudden something tough comes out in a way.
Yeah.
You talked about a plugin that's been used over and over. It's funny you mentioned that because I find Hans Zimmer or everybody that sort of worked with him, there was a very consistent music and certain notes were very similar, like Gladiator, Crimson Tide, The Rock, Lion King, and then Batman completely changed everything. At least from Zimmer and team, meaning you guys, and then that sort of started becoming a trend. And Dune, I think the first Dune changed, made brought that change again. Now I have listened to Dune soundtrack few times. Frankly honest with you, it's slowly wearing on me. I didn't really enjoy it as much as I did in Zimmer's old work, but at the same time
Mhm.
I know it's something fresh, right? Because these things, because in my head it's all like, the last 20, 30 years of all the
Right.
music that, but it's good to see that because you after a while you just start being repetitive, whether it's music or whether it's like, making films or whatever you're doing. You just have to challenge yourself to try something new, even if majority of people don't like it, because then it slowly wears on you.
Yeah, no, of course. And I think that's why what makes Han so successful. Because yeah, you can't keep doing those big, bold, heroic tunes from
Yeah.
Rock, Crimson Tide, Gladiator, because there's only so many that you can do. And, he definitely changed the face of film music back then. and then I feel like Hans gets bored and he wants to bring new ideas.
Yeah.
And so things like Dark Knight, Inception, Interstellar, these were all Sherlock Holmes. These were all opportunities to bring in new instruments and sample things so that you could play tunes in new and different ways. And Hans has a style, and he has a harmonic structure that works incredibly. He found his key, and I think that that's what makes him so prominent in the film music world, is that he doesn't just keep doing the same things over and over again. And Dune was a tough one because you're creating music for a world that's 10,000 years in the future.
Mm.
And it's trying to come up with something completely new and different. And Hans started to use the octatonic scale, the whole half whole step. And the crazy thing about that scale, and so many composers can resonate with it, is that you can create actually some beautiful music with these new harmonics, that doesn't sound like things before. There's like a little slight edge to it. There's that major minor that you're playing on that kind of it perks your ear up. And I feel like it may wear on people, but it's new, it's different, it's fresh, and it's the thing about Dune is that that music is so specific to that film. Hans is so passionate about this book and this series with Denis. He's just poured his life into it. And I think that he wanted to create something for that film, for that world, not for film music. I think that he was quite successful in doing that, in creating a whole new world. And even coming back to work on the second one, I was blown away with what he was doing. It was just I can't believe that a man that has written over 250 themes is still able to reinvent the wheel and still able to come up with something that hasn't been done before.
I'm surprised, but I'm not surprised that he's written over 250 themes. I mean,
Yeah,
that's insane. That's. I mean, it just seems like 200 is not a big, but it's a big number. That's a
it really
huge
is.
number.
And it's not
Wow.
just 4 bar themes, it's well thought 32 bar themes with B parts, C parts, it just, and it's yeah, it's incredible how he can just go back into the writing room and come up with new material.
Right. So from 2008 up until Top Gun Maverick, you were kind of like um, additional music writer, technician, all that stuff, and your first soundtrack was last year, which I'm having a hard time pronouncing. Menshiha's Low, is that how you pronounce it? At least that's what it says in IMDb.
I'm sorry, which soundtrack?
Mensheye.
Oh, I don't
Slow.
know what that is.
Yeah, you may want to get that corrected on IMDb. It says that
Yeah.
you were a composer. What about Ping Pong, The Triumph?
Yeah, so I mean that was done with Lorne. I think
Okay.
that my solo career kind of started back in 2016. I did a film with Issa Lopez, who's directing the current True Detective. It was a Mexican comedy. I also did this film called The Corrupted, which is a UK-based film with Sam Claflin and Timothy Spall. And then I've also done, a few different Chinese films, from Sky Hunter to The 800, which was back in 2020, and then Ping Pong, which I did with Lorne. Lorne had written the main theme, and I had done the music. Um, so yeah, I think my solo career has been, kind of on and off for the past few years, and kind of filling it in with additional music credits as well.
Yeah. So would Gran Turismo would be the first major one in your view, like a Hollywood
Yeah,
major film.
yeah, it's
So
kind of the first worldwide release solo credit.
how do you feel about it?
I'm excited. Yeah, it's I Lauren texted me back in February about it, and we started working on themes, started working on suites back then, and it was a long road. There were a lot of themes and arcs that needed to be sorted and that needed to be talked through with Neill, and we were definitely wanting to pay homage to the video game world and the franchise that
Hmm.
Gran Turismo has started. And we didn't want to necessarily take anything harmonically from the music, but just more the atmosphere of the gaming world, and how to make things more immersive for the driver. Like incorporating certain engine sounds, certain car techniques into sound design, into backing tracks, into percussion, like not using actual samples, but just kind of taking inspiration from that and seeing how we can further push that, because the film is extremely fast paced, and it's 2 hours, but it feels like an hour and a half. And Neill was he was very in touch with keeping the pace up and moving the story along, and not feeling like we're getting bogged down by any of the dialogue scenes, or any other scenes that kind of dragged in the film. I mean, there really weren't many. But yeah, it was incredible. I did the whole film in the UK. I moved to the UK back in December, and I've kind of been popping back and forth. And I did a lot here in the US as well. But it was, yeah, there were a lot of new discoveries, because we were trying to create like a soundscape that would be specific to this film, and that would actually also be in touch with a lot of the source music that's there, because there's a lot of hip hop music, and there's a couple like rock tracks and everything. And with there being so much source music in the film, we wanted to have the score to kind of be on a similar level, and to resonate with these tracks, and not just be a typical score. And so, one thing that we really wanted to expand on was the way that we use vocals. I feel like vocals can play such an important part in
Sure.
score, and it can bring like a certain humanity to everything. You can help you resonate with the characters, and but not using vocals in a traditional sense. Will kind of take off the fronts and put on long fades, so it doesn't really, you kind of have a voice that's coming out of nowhere, or throwing it through vocoders, doubling, tripling, with a bunch of different artists, and kind of seeing what could come from there. It was this whole synth Vox thing that Neill actually really encouraged us to see where we could take it, and kind of using short percussive vocals, to double like sequencers and synth sounds, just to add a certain humanity to it, because we didn't really want to use guitar. Guitar has been used in so many racing films, and it seems like that instrument that composers tend to gravitate towards too, and we wanted to keep it young and fresh.
Yeah, and Neil has done some incredible films. It's been a while since he's done quite a few films at the beginning of his career, which was District 9 and Elysium, and what was the other one? It was Chappie something, I think it was called.
Yeah.
Yeah. Had you seen his films before, just to get an idea just to get an idea what kind of music he's more attracted to in his storytelling?
Well, I worked on Chappie.
Oh, you
Um,
did. Okay.
yeah, Hans Zimmer did the music, and I worked on it with Steve Mazzaro, and everyone else. So, that was one of the reasons as to why Lauren kind of reached out to me, because I had this previous work experience with him, and yeah, Neil has a very fresh take. he really loves things that are hummable, that are singable, things that, the audience can latch on to.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't just want driving music that just pedals through everything. He wants to have a little bit of ear candy, something that you can be like, oh, okay, what's going on there?
Yeah.
And so yeah, on Chappie, we Hans wanted to do an all synthesizer score. And we didn't use any orchestra. And we did use real instruments, but they were going through synths, they were going through effects. And so we were kind of creating this whole new world. And Neill he gave us the freedom to experiment. He was all for experimenting, all for finding new ways of doing things. And we saw another opportunity to do that on Gran Turismo. Um, is funny when I went to it wasn't really a premiere. It was like a fan appreciation screening because of everything
Mm.
that's going on with SAG right now. And Neill was there, and Neill was like, yeah, all my films are like fucked up dystopian pictures. And he's like, and he said that he wanted to create something digestible and a bit more mainstream, and kind of create a Rocky kind of film, have an underdog that you really fight for. And that was really one of the highlights through the film, was how do we propel Jan throughout the story. And we're always focused on Jan, whether it's his love of driving, his family atmosphere, the anxiety that he has inside. He has such a strong fear of failure. Is how do we represent that in the score, but also overcome it when he does eventually break through because of the drive and determination. When I found out that this story was real, I couldn't believe it. I
Yeah.
was blown away. I was like, how is this real? Like when I remember when I first watched the film, and I'm like, yeah, gamers becoming real life racers. Yeah, right. That's bullshit. And then to know that this guy Jan Martinborough had been through it, and yeah, and like many other people have actually gone through it. I think it was quite an inspiration, and it was yeah. Like how do we fuel that fire? How do we move that engine for Jan to propel himself into this real life career and out of sim racing?
I'm glad you mentioned that because it is a crazy story. Like if
Yeah.
somebody, if it wasn't a true story, you would think it's such a fake, unrealistic film. But the fact that it's a true story, you have to, of course, buy into it. But what I find my question is this, is that the fact that it's a crazy story, right? Like, and obviously for him to go from being a video gamer to a real driver, it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to become an overnight success. He had to go through all the pain and the suffering to get to where he wanted, rejection and all these things. Your career in the beginning, obviously, like I said, or even now, up until now, it has had a lot of hiccups. I'm 100% sure. Ups and downs. That's just life. How much of that, your own pain or troubles that you went through coming to where you are now, did you try to incorporate, if at all, into the music, that feeling of rejection, that feeling of struggling, and the work ethic and all that?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. The most recent story that resonates with me the most is the pandemic,
Mm.
because when the pandemic happened, everything kind of shut down. Like I was working on Top Gun still, and I was about to start working on Dune. Uh, and so, but the pandemic just kind of made me realize that everything can stop. And no one is invincible. I believe that leading up to the pandemic, I was very fortunate to be working on a consistent basis. And there would be times where I'd have a month or 2 month break. And so after we finished Dune back in 2020, I went about a year unemployed. I went
Mm.
like there was about a year of trying to get films, trying to get projects. Just things weren't out there. I was talking to my agent every week. We were trying to work on battle plans and everything. And I think that that was my first real taste of rejection. And like, I don't think I can necessarily constitute it as failure, because it was a global pandemic. We're having to go through so many films were just put on the shelf, and
Right.
there was a lot of restructuring and everything. And I think that I had a real battle with my ego back then, and I realized that no one's invincible. And if and I kind of took it as motivation to propel myself as a composer, to realize that never settle for anything, never think that just something is okay, or never thinking that okay is good enough. Constantly, I in that time I found nature. I would go on hikes. I started to listen to music again. I think that that's a crazy thing that a lot of people don't know, but as a composer, like, there are times where you just don't listen to music for pleasure. You're just listening stuff to research, look into things. And back in 2021, I started to listen to music again for pleasure. And I started watching films again. I started watching 2 to 3 films a week. Get like watching all the art films of the past 5 years that I had missed because I was working on other
Yeah.
projects. And I just threw myself back into my passion, back into what I love, back into what got me into this career. Because the love of music is what got me into this. And you can lose sight of that very easily. And it can turn into a job, and it can turn into something that's quite formulaic. And then you get stale and you stop expanding yourself. um, and I think that this period of time was a time where I really wanted to expand myself, and um start writing music that meant something, that mattered, that had a voice, that had a story, that had passion behind it. And not just settling for whatever came. And so I think that I use that really as motivation throughout this film. Was how do we propel ourselves, how do we propel the music, how do we propel the sound design to fit this story and arc in new and different ways. And I really start to try and resonate with what Jan was going through. um so yeah.
Yeah,
I'm
no,
not sure
that
if I actually answered your
you
question.
did. You did, because it's funny you mentioned that, because between 2010 and up until pandemic, I stopped watching movies the way I used to watch it. And there were many reasons for that. Once, also kids came into life, and busy making films. And then pandemic happened, and obviously just like you, like I watched Breaking Bad, the entire series. I had never seen it before. And then watching all these films that I had never even heard of before. And it you're right, because when you're in that medium, you you do stuff for research. You'll watch something for research, or just a clip or something, or listen to a piece, but you forget why you fell in love with what you do in the first place. And
Right.
I kid you not, now watching movies or good series or small, like 8 episode series, it's just so rejuvenating. Like it's like life. It's not just your work or my work or anyone else's work. It's just being in that world. It's I don't even know how to explain it. It just feels like you're alive again, and you're back into that world that you always grew up watching and listening to.
Exactly. Like, you have to remember how to be a kid again.
It,
We lose
that's a key
sight of
word.
that childlike mind of absorbing everything that's around us. And like, I have such a passion for film and music that once you lose that passion, you lose that opinion, you lose your voice, you lose like what you're trying to contribute to this creative world. And things can just become vanilla, cookie cutter, just very
Yeah.
ordinary, serviceable.
Yeah, no, no, no kidding. What's next for you besides Dune, or anything else that you're able to reveal that you are working on as a composer?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things that I can't necessarily talk about too much.
No worries.
There's yeah, I'm just wrapping up this film called Yesteryear. It's like a very artsy film. It's directed by my close friend Adam Villaseñor. He did this movie called In Full Bloom, which was a boxing film that was released back in 2018, I believe, that I did the music for. And during the pandemic, he came to me, because he went to Mexico during the
Mm.
pandemic, the initial stages, just to like disappear. And it was, quite wise in retrospect,
Yep.
not having to deal with empty grocery stores and all that kind of stuff. Um, but when he went down there, he wrote a script with his girlfriend, of whom is the lead actress in the film, Koryanka Kilcher. And it's pretty much just about a girl losing her mind in COVID times. He shot the whole film on his iPhone. It's completely self-financed. And it really it is a passion project for me. I am an executive producer on it. And
Lovely.
it's very close to finishing. So hopefully within the next 6 months, it will be out there. But yeah, I think just one story from it is, there's a huge Native American influence on the film, because the lead actress is actually Dene from the Navajo tribe. And so it is a thread throughout the film, and we actually got permission from the president of Navajo Nation to go onto the reservation to record a tribe's healing song. Um, and it
Nice.
was just a once in a lifetime experience. We went onto the reservation, and then all of a sudden we come up to the tribe, and it turns out that one of the girls is having a coming of life ceremony. And this coming of life ceremony for a Native American girl is nothing like a sweet 16 or a quinceañera. It's like a week of hard work. It's a week of running, cleaning everything, making dinner, all of this stuff. They really put them to work.
Wow.
When we got there, she was actually going on her spirit run, which was like one of the last runs of the week, where she had to run half mile out, half mile back. And they just wanted as many people around here to support her. And they're just, everyone's like, scream at the top of your lungs, just scream, scream. So we're running with her, just screaming, trying to get her like spirits to come down to be with her. And I'm running, screaming. I'm like, what the hell has happened to me? Because this was back in 2021, like we were still under some kind of lockdown, and this was like the first human interaction I had had since the pandemic started. Um, and it was just a once in a lifetime experience. We were able to go into the Hogan, the prayer hut, and hear the medicine men, chant and welcome her into womanhood. We saw a goat being sacrificed or killed for dinner, not sacrificed, killed for dinner. And it was incredible. And then the next day, we recorded these five girls singing their healing
Nice.
song in the Hogan, and then we recorded this grandmother who, recorded her in her place, and all of this stuff it's in the film, and it's a thread throughout the film. So it is a project I'm quite passionate about, and is as soon as there's some kind of distribution or festival news, I
Yeah.
I will be letting everyone know, because I can't wait for this film to be out there.
So is this a narrative documentary or a narrative
It's
film?
it's a feature. It's a feature film, not a documentary.
Okay.
And it's a very artsy style film, kind of like Last Year in Marienbad, combined
Mm.
with um uh modern influences. The director Adam, he hates talking about influences and where he drew from. He's like, no, this is yesteryear, this is new, and this is different. um so so
What's the name of the film again? Sorry, I just
it's
can't
called
find it.
it's called Yesteryear.
Yesteryear. Okay, let's
Yeah.
see. I don't think it's on IMDb yet. Yeah, no, that sounds exciting. I would love to see it, and I'm obviously seeing it sounds like a very festival, like SW S time. SXW or what is that thing called? The Robert De Niro Festival in New York. Tribeca.
Rebecca.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's exciting. Good for you. So you're sort of shifting into producing for now a little bit.
No, not necessarily. I think,
I know how that works. I'm just joking
yeah,
around.
I
I
I
get
put a
it.
lot of hours into that score.
Yeah,
So
I know.
yeah.
I know. Well, wonderful, man. That's great. I listen. I had a blast talking to you. Thank you so much for your time. I would love to talk to you about the upcoming film. But
Mhm.
before that, I would love to chat with you maybe one more time in the next couple of months about something else that you feel that you want to talk about. Maybe a
Okay.
combination of films that you have worked on, if that's something you're open
Yeah.
to.
No, no, absolutely. Yeah, no, I'm always up for chatting. So, yeah, it was great chatting with you today.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you so much for watching and listening. Don't forget to subscribe, like, share, and comment. And do come back for another episode. Until then, have a great day.